Hey there, Kevin here with another episode of the Feel Good English podcast. How you doing out there? Are you smiling? And speaking of smiling, today I have an interview with Vanessa, the English teacher, who has a wonderful smile. She is an experienced American English teacher, and today we're going to talk a little bit about why she got into English teaching. I asked her the difference between teaching Americans that are in high school versus teaching foreigners learning English that are the same age. And like always, we're going to talk about a book, and Vanessa chose a book called The Diary of a Young Girl, which is a fascinating true story about Anne Frank. And Vanessa chose some quotes to talk about from the book, which give great insights onto life, how to live a better life, how to be a better version of yourself, and how to improve the lives of others as well. Vanessa is also going to talk about what she thinks is key to becoming a confident English speaker. And like always, if you want transcripts to this episode, go to feelgoodenglish.com, where you can find out how to become a member, which gives you access to transcripts for free. So after the episode, go to feelgoodenglish.com to learn more about that. And without any further delay, let's get into the interview with Vanessa from speakenglishwithvanessa.com. Hey everybody, I'm here with Vanessa from Speak English with Vanessa. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing great. Thanks, Kevin.
Thanks for being here with us and telling your story to the Feel Good English members. So let's start there, Vanessa. Who are you? Where are you? Why do you do what you do? Let's talk about that kind of stuff.
Who are you? This is already a difficult question. Well, I'm Vanessa, and at the moment I live in North Carolina on the east coast of the U.S. And I'm an English teacher, but I think beyond that too, just a culture lover, interested in traveling and meeting people who have different lifestyles than me. But my job and my passion now is to teach online and help people around the world, similar to what you're doing, just helping people to improve their English, their confidence, and the ability to communicate.
Awesome. And so tell me, how did you get into that field? What brought you into the English teaching field?
I think it started a long time ago, probably in high school, because I used to be friends with every exchange student who was at my school. And I realized, why am I always friends with the exchange students? And it was because I just felt really interested in helping someone who didn't know anything about the basics that I was used to, like how to get to your next class, how to communicate with people, how to deal with different aspects of American culture. And that was really interesting to me to learn about their culture. So I think that interest started pretty young, but I started officially teaching English about 6 or 7 years ago in the US to native English speakers. So I taught middle school and high school English at a small school in Pennsylvania, and decided I wanted to go more internationally. So I moved to France and lived with the family, helped their kids to speak English, and then moved to Korea and taught there for 3 years. And now I'm back here in the US.
So very interesting. And for our listeners that might be curious, so tell me the difference between teaching middle school or high school to native English speakers. So let's say maybe 13, 14-year-olds, 15, 16-year-olds in the U.S. who are American versus teaching students in other countries who are around the same age. So tell me the difference between those types of classes.
Yeah. So when I taught in the U.S., it was a general English class. So we focused on reading, analyzing what you were reading, kind of like what you're doing on this podcast with books, writing, presentation skills. Personally, I didn't really want to push the more grammatical side of it, diagramming sentences and really stressing about spelling, those kind of things. I wanted it to integrate a more natural approach. The school wasn't always pleased with that, but I think the students loved being able to do projects and presentations instead of just multiple choice tests. So I tried to be a little more natural in that way. But those students obviously could speak English naturally. That was their native language. But when I taught that similar age, high school, elementary school, even adults in Korea, their main thing was perfecting as much as possible the language itself. I would have loved to talk about books and extra material that we could learn English through, but most of those students weren't at that level yet. I had one student who was actually in elementary school. I think she was only 11 years old, and we read Harry Potter together. And that was incredibly fun just to see her eyes light up as we read different parts and be able to learn something that's not just grammar or vocabulary, but learn through the book. So that was fun, but it generally wasn't focused on extra materials. And in my opinion, I think that was more the school's decision in those other countries. If it were up to me, I would have loved to create that kind of material for them and bring in some more natural level appropriate things. So kind of a negative part about learning in a school. You're having to follow what the administrators think, but there's some differences. Yeah.
And I think even you having that experience of teaching Americans, literature and those types of English lessons, at least you had that background too, and you could go around the world and teach other people, kind of having that desire to make English more real and kind of make English come to life to them, even if you couldn't focus on that. I'm sure your students could feel that from you. Yeah,
definitely. Just that passion, I think it comes through. They can pick it up.
And to you, Vanessa, with all of this experience, when it comes to teaching foreign students, what do you think is most important for them to know? And what do you think is most important for you to do with them so they can become a confident, competent English speaker?
One of the most important things is realizing the purpose of language. And the purpose is to communicate with other people. So at a minimum, if the other person can understand you, you're doing a great job. Even if you just use gestures and you say simple words like, hungry, food. Of course, a lot of people listening to this can say more than that. But if you can communicate, that's the basis of language. So I think a lot of English learners feel really stressed about being perfect and remembering all the rules and anything polite or rude or anything that they learned in school, but really coming back to the basics of communication is going to help build confidence and just have fun. When you can communicate, that's way more fun than reading something that's just grammar rules.
And that's great. And I think it also simplifies it for the students because they don't have to focus on all of these rules and speaking correctly. They can focus more on building their skills and building the ability to communicate through using certain words, using their bodies, developing those skills of communication more than focusing on the real specific details and all of those rules that can frustrate a lot of learners. So
yeah, and it's good to get to those as you become more of an intermediate learner, advanced learner. But I think feeling confident that I can communicate with someone else, that's the base thing. And when you feel confident in that, okay, great. You can tackle more difficult details in the future, learn little nuances and whatnot. But if you can communicate, be satisfied with yourself. That's a great point to be at.
Going into what we do here on the Feel Good English podcast, you brought in mind something you're going to talk about, a book that you're going to talk about today. I read a lot, and I really think lessons learned from reading what other people have to say and how others have used their life experiences to become more of who they want to be can really help us to do the same. And so, Vanessa, what book are you going to talk with the audience today about?
I wanted to talk about a book that probably most people have heard about. I'm not sure if everyone's read it, but it's called The Diary of a Young Girl, and it's by Anne Frank. So maybe some people have read Anne Frank's diary, but I think this is such an incredible book that people know about, but do we really know the details of what she's talking about and how we can learn through her youthful, innocent voice? There's so much in there.
So, Diary of Anne Frank, can you give us just a little bit of background about the book, and then give us some examples of valuable insights that you think this book brings?
Sure. So in general, Anne Frank is a teenage girl. She was 13 years old when her dad gave her a diary. And I feel like most people have heard of her, but if you haven't, this is not a fictional character. She was real. She is a real person. And her dad gave her a diary and she just started writing. And as she was writing, she wrote about what was happening to them. They were hiding from the Nazis at that time because they were a Jewish family living in a Jewish and non-Jewish area, but they were in hiding. So these are some of her really raw and sincere thoughts about what was happening in her life. And she knew that she wanted to publish her diary, which is really interesting. I didn't realize that at first, but she wrote it and then she rewrote it and she edited things. So we've got all different versions in the Anne Frank Museum to be able to see the process that she went through as a 15, 16-year-old girl deciding, what do I want the world to know? So that's something to keep in mind too. This is not just her diary. This is her revised ideas about what she wanted to share with the world. But eventually her family was found out. Someone said there's some Jews hiding in the attic here, so they got taken away, and eventually they died in a concentration camp. So that's, I think, built her image as well, because it's such a tragic story, but there's a lot we can learn from it as well.
So can you give me one or two examples from the book that you can share with the audience?
Yeah. Well, I've got some quotes here because I think that's the best way to hear it, is just through her voice. And this is a translation. She didn't write it in English, but I think that we can still learn from it. And this is one that I wanted to mention about how we can accomplish so much. So she says, and remember, she wrote it when she was 13 to 15 or 16 years old. So she was a young teenager living a really challenging life. So this is not from a mature 40-year-old woman with life experience, just a child becoming a woman. So she said, everyone has inside of him a piece of good news. The good news is that you don't know how great you can be, how much you can love, what you can accomplish, and what your potential is. Wonderful. So clear and straightforward. Right,
which I think is the benefits of her being so young at the time. So that's talking about that quote too, the good news inside of us.
Yeah.
So she was saying that we don't really know our potential. Is that right? We don't really know how good we can be, how powerful we all are. That's what I heard from that. Is that
yes.
what you gained as well?
Yes, I think that sometimes we need to, in our darker times or in our self-doubting times, to realize that with the right motivation, we do have a lot of potential in us, a lot that we can do. And I found the quote, probably a lot of people have heard this. I think it's also something that's succinct and clear, but she says, how wonderful it is that nobody need wait a single moment before starting to improve the world. Today, we can do it now. And these are all taken out of a longer story that she wrote talking about the day. But as you read this book and you realize that these kind of philosophical points are coming from a young teenager, I think personally it makes me kind of rethink teenagers. And when we see them, especially as people who are not teenagers anymore, when we see teenagers, we've got these stereotypes and ideas. But really, there's so much more depth that's there. And not just for teenagers, but for people who may be maybe from a different country or different background, rethinking what we know about them or what we think we know.
What's amazing about this is the conditions that she was in while writing these words. And for me, it's almost, I'm trying to think of how she was able to have these insights on life, these big life ideas, while being so oppressed and scared and basically hiding to save her life.
Yeah. Yeah, I think a lot of those things too are based on just the human ability to adapt to different situations. She was still with her family. She was also pretty much a child, so she knew what was happening, but I think especially at that time period, they didn't know the extent to what was actually happening, but they knew they had to hide. But being able to adapt to different situations, for humans, it's pretty incredible, or at least tolerate them.
And maybe because too, she was in such a isolated environment, and her world was extremely simplified. Maybe she was able to see things in people that she couldn't have seen or wouldn't have seen just in a normal setting, being out in the world when there's so much going on. So maybe that was where she had these visions of just seeing how people reacted with each other when they only had each other. They only had
exactly. I think the people they lived with another family and then another guy as well in their small attic home. So she wasn't exposed to 200 Facebook friends or people out at work. She was just exposed to this small group and really could study their interactions and kind of become a better version of herself because she was really learning from the people around her. So I think as humans, as English learners, we can do that, study other people and try to become better.
Yeah, awesome. Very, very cool. So definitely sounds like a great book for English learners to read as well. Would you agree?
Yes. I think especially the level of this book for intermediate learners, I would say they could definitely read it. And if they have a Kindle or any kind of e-reader, usually they've got built-in dictionaries. So you can just scan over a word that you don't know and it'll tell you what it is, which is a really cool feature of reading an ebook.
Yeah, it's very true. And you can save the words that you had to look up and keep them in your own little dictionary, right?
Yeah.
So great. And it's really cool that you have been an English teacher and you've read so much and you've taught students about books, and just hearing you talk about this book and bringing it to life and sharing the lessons from this is so fun. So I thank you for doing that.
My pleasure. Thanks for your great questions.
So what we do here, what we do on the Feel Good English podcast is we try to, like you said a few minutes ago, to become better versions of ourselves. And when I look at books, I see them as problem solvers. Like, I'm dealing with this, and who else has had these problems, and who else has struggled with this, and what have they done to get through it? Is there anything that's happening in your life now that's that you're struggling with?
I would say something that happens not just today, but every day is just focusing on small problems instead of looking at the big picture. The next 5 years of my life, the next 10 years of my life. And I think it's easy for me to get stuck in those little details. Today I have this to-do list, and thinking about the big picture is going to keep that motivation up. And to connect it to this book, I think she does an excellent job of this. Her daily life could have seemed so boring, or her life situation could have just seemed so tragic, but she kept thinking about the big picture of humanity or humans, or what's going to happen in the future. So keeping an eye on the bigger picture is something that I constantly have to remind myself of. Why am I doing this? What's my motivation? So I think that's something that probably a lot of people struggle with, but definitely for me. Definitely
connect with that. And even as English speakers, I think sometimes students, they lose the bigger picture of what they're doing, day-to-day studying or having problems or trying to communicate in English. They always will face little problems, and maybe they'll get frustrated and stressed and bored, discouraged. But what would be the big why behind what they're doing? Why they're doing what they're doing? And in a few years from now, if they just keep that big picture in mind, as long as they're doing something, they will get there, and they will become an English speaker, and they'll be able to have conversations with English speakers all around the world and connect with people online. And these days we get distracted so much by the little things, and we do have such big dreams, and going online and seeing other people's lives and almost getting envious sometimes of what they have, and we're not there now, and we only see the good things often as well. Behind that are stories of people getting through day to day and dealing with small problems every day for months and years, and then eventually getting to a place where they will post a picture of themselves on the beach with a computer saying, "Look at my life." But there's a story behind this, and it's the path to get there.
That's really good advice for English learners, because I know some of my students, they recently one of them from Italy met up with, or just randomly stumbled across a tourist in her city, and they asked her some questions. And usually when we talk together, she speaks fine. We've got great conversations. But in that moment with that tourist, I guess she felt nervous, or she felt like she didn't communicate as well as she could have. And she seemed really upset about it and frustrated. But thinking about the big picture is important, even if you've got some little disappointments. Like, oh, I wish I'd said this, or I should have said this. Why didn't I think about this? But then realizing, hey, the next time I've already made this mistake, not really a mistake, but I've already done this. So next time in the future, it's going to be better. And thinking about the big picture. It's okay to be upset about something, but don't hold on to it.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And knowing that mistakes are great tools to help us get better. Right.
Yeah, good motivation for improving.
Yeah, sure. So wonderful. Thanks so much for talking about the book. Thanks very much for talking about what you do. And people listening to this, how can they connect with you, Vanessa? Where can they find you online?
The best place is speakenglishwithvanessa.com, my website. Got lots of hopefully useful information for them there.
Awesome. And do you have courses, classes? What do you do?
Yes. So the first thing I'd recommend that they do, just to get a general overview of what I do, my method, very similar to your method, natural, stress-free, is to download the free ebook, which is just at the top of the page. And I've got courses, YouTube videos. I don't have a podcast. Maybe that'll come in the future. But there's a lot of materials there that they can use to improve their English and connect with the community, because that's a huge part of English, is using it.
Yeah, absolutely. Great. So speakenglishwithvanessa.com. Go there and get her free ebook and learn more about how Vanessa can improve your life through English learning. Thanks again, Vanessa, for being here.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks so much for having me, Kevin.
Alrighty, and we'll talk to you soon.
Yes. See you later, Kevin.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. At 4 minutes and 27 seconds, you hear Vanessa say, "If it were up to me." To be up to me. If it were up to me, I would do things differently. If something is up to you, it would make it your decision. If it were up to me, I would never teach grammar, for example. Or if it were up to me, I would never go back to that school. If it were up to me, meaning if it was my decision. 5 minutes and 12 seconds. 9 minutes and 10 seconds. Vanessa says they were in hiding. Anne Frank and her family were in hiding. This just means they were hiding somewhere. You could say they were hiding in an attic, they were hiding from the Nazis, or they were in hiding. So when you say they were in hiding, that becomes the adjective form. They were in hiding. Versus they were hiding, that's a verb. So it means the same exact thing. It's just a different word form. 15 minutes, 15 seconds. Built-in dictionaries. If something is built in, like in a Kindle, when you're reading a digital book, they have dictionaries built in. It means it's part of the system. It comes with the system. It's built into the system. Another example, on your phone, it has a built-in camera or a built-in microphone. It's built into the system. It's built into the product. You don't have to add it. And a nice little expression Vanessa uses a couple times. She says, "my pleasure." If somebody thanks you for doing something, like "thanks for being here," or "thanks for helping me out," or "thanks for talking about this book with me," you could answer with "my pleasure." meaning it was my pleasure to do this for you. It's something that made you happy as well. It's kind of like saying you're welcome, but instead of saying you're welcome, you would say, oh, my pleasure. Like it was not a problem. I liked doing this. And there you have it. I hope you enjoyed the interview with Vanessa. As you can see, she's a very nice, friendly, fun teacher. If you want to know more and connect with her and possibly even buy a course or have classes with her, go to speakenglishwithvanessa.com. Again, if you want transcripts to this episode, go to feelgoodenglish.com. If you want to find out how to get a digital version of the book, A Diary of a Young Girl, you can also find that on my website. Until the next episode, stay positive, think of the big picture, don't get too frustrated and lose focus. Know that the day-to-day struggles and difficulties and frustrations are all helping you get closer to the big picture, your big dream in the future. Keep working hard, keep focused, and stay positive, and you will get there one day. Thanks for listening. Until next time. Bye-bye.